Today we have two guests on this exhibit of Father Giussani. We have John Zucchi, who's a professor at McGill University, and Francesca Silano, who is a professor of history at Houghton College. Hopefully I got that right. So the pronunciation. So Francesca and John have been good friends for a very long time. And I'm just really grateful for their yes to have this discussion with us. A little bit, a few ground rules. First, this is being recorded. So if you are uncomfortable with that, you should probably jump off. But please don't jump off. We want you to stay. So this is being recorded, and I don't know when the recording is going to come out, but you will definitely be averted to that on the CL web, on the New York Encounter website. The second is that this exhibit is not our typical exhibit. If we were at the encounter, we would be able to go to a room and hear people give witnesses, etc. Tonight, instead, we are, or today instead, we are listening to two witnesses share about their encounter with Father Giussani. The exhibit itself is a video. The video is about an hour long, and it will show up in the chat at the end, and I'll speak about that more at the end. So we'll go ahead and begin just right off the bat with the first question, and we'll start off with you, John. Before we begin, I want to share we have two technical assistants today. We have Sean, who has the New York Encounter background, and we have Veronica, and she is just waved. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can put it in the chat. We will have time at the very end for people to ask questions of our discussants or make comments. So we'll begin with the first question. So John, we'll start with you. And that is, how has your life been marked by Father Giussani? You're I would say, child of Giussani. You met him many years ago, and definitely your life has been marked. So if you could share a little bit about that with us.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that one as a starter. I'll begin. No, I'll begin I'd be very short on this one by simply stating that from the moment that I met him, and I met him before I met him physically, I understood almost immediately. I understood that the rest of my life would be somehow related to him. And I don't mean by just a kind of a friendship, or by, what do you call it, a distance relationship where we'd speak to each other every now and then, but marked for the rest of my life in the sense that everything I did somehow would refer back to this relationship with him. When he talks, he often used this word, that this comparison with a charism, comparison with a specific person. I understood that everything I did after that, somehow I'd have to account with that person somehow, but not because I had to do it for his sake, but for my sake, for my own happiness. Ultimately, it was an intuition I had very, very, very early on, almost the very, very beginning of the relationship, which was, as I said, before I physically met him. I can go more into that if you want, but afterwards.
Yeah, John, why don't you tell us really, how was that encounter with Father Giussani? First through maybe his words or people who knew him, and then later personally. Tell us that story.
Okay, very simply, I did meet him, in fact, through friends. I went to Cambridge in late 1983 to do a 2-year postdoc there in England. And there I met a group of two people, in fact, that soon became 3. And I was just, I don't know, there was something about them that really struck me and bothered me at the same time. Bothered me because I was Catholic, my background. I was a very individualistic Catholic. In the sense, I call myself consumer Catholic, but not, I describe myself then as consumer Catholic, but not the way we normally think about it. In other words, not the sense of choosing certain teachings of the church and not accepting others, not in that sense, but in the sense that I would just kind of choose the people I would deal with, as it were. So I never had a sense of community, of belonging anywhere. When I went to England and met these people, I couldn't believe the unity among them, the way they were. And I was, both, how can I put it, attracted by this, and also unsettled by it, because it was a breath of fresh air to see them on the one hand. On the other hand, I was unsettled by this because I didn't like this idea of community. I remember arguing specifically about them, about these questions of community, who needs community, we've got the teachings of the church, etc. And but in this way, I think I met Father Giussani through them. I saw there was something very different about Father Giussani through them. Then I immediately thought of him as must be someone very special, very intelligent. Certainly spoke a great deal about him. And at first, my first thought was, well, maybe they're treating him almost like a guru here. Why are they talking about him all the time? Giussani, 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 right? And I couldn't, and this was because I think I could not understand that someone could have this kind of affection for someone else, that the kind of affection I saw there in them for him, I couldn't understand it. So I had to reduce it to my understanding and therefore say, well, they must be just making him out to be more than he is. Then I have two more steps, I guess, on the way to him ultimately, right? The first of these was the one of the friends there, simply said, that if you've seen something that attracts you here, let me just give you something to read by him, and you'll maybe see something there. And she gave me this transcript of a conversation he had, a question and answer session that he had with people in Milan, I believe, or near Milan or something like that, some adults there, and I read through it, but I remember one line really hit me. It said, someone asked him, you always speak of affection, but what is affection? And he responded, he responded immediately, affection is to have the passion for a destiny of another. I said, man, I was bowled over by that line, because I said, how is it possible that someone can say that? In other words, it would be easy for me to reduce it. That's a nice line. It's a good line, whatever. But it was too big to be a good line. It was too deep for it. There had to be, this can only come from an experience, not from a good idea, right? And so I knew there was something really special here. The next step for me was the following. While I was in Cambridge, the person actually through whom I mostly met the community was living a path of vocation towards what's, I guess everyone here probably knows what it is, Memoris Domini. But I was living this path towards this total dedication to God, including living the virginal life. And I fell in love with her, and she fell in love with me. And my hope was, well, she'll maybe stay on and in this relationship with me, and we can live happily ever after. And she said that that she wanted to really talk about the Father Giussani, because she still was troubled by all of this. And so I knew exactly what he was going to say. He was a priest after all. Go away, leave him. Don't get tempted by this. Just stay away from this, because this will take you away from your vocation. And I was just flabbergasted. I couldn't believe. I just floored by his response to her. He said, when she said, I can leave him because that way I won't have to bother with this issue, he said, no, don't leave him. He said very emphatically, don't leave him, but go deeper in the relationship with him. But always with an eye to your destiny, always with an eye to your vocation, he said. When she told me this, I just couldn't believe that a priest would ever say this. I knew what a priest would say, and this priest didn't say this. So I understood that. That's where I just understood there was something just absolutely outstanding about this man. And from that moment, I remember very, very clearly, explicitly, that in that moment I understood that this path was for me. That's where I understood. I don't know why. I had an intuition of who this Father Giussani was then, and I understood that I would never leave him after that. And after this, I went to Rome for a conference, maybe about a couple of months after this response of his. I was for a conference there, and he just happened to be that same weekend there in Rome for spiritual exercises to university students, and a friend invited me to go there to the exercises. So I went there, and it was the weekend that Father Giussani's mother died. So he was very somber that weekend, and I happened to see him. He was giving his last talk on the Sunday morning, and he was coming out of this hall at the very end, and I waited outside the door and hoping to see him. And he came out the door, and I went up to him, and I just said, I'm Anna's friend, this woman's friend in Cambridge. And he didn't even smile, but his eyes smiled. They just glistened, they just lit up. And he said, "Oh, so you're the one," he said. And he said, we'll have to meet at some point. I have to go to my mother's funeral now, but at some point we'll meet. And that was the beginning. But in even that instant there, I remember being just gleeful, because I felt understood in that instant by the way he probed me with a love. His eyes just looked at me with this deep love, as if I were all that was there in the world in that instant. And that was the way I met him. And there were then many other moments after that, obviously, where I was able to speak with him, but we can deal with that afterwards, maybe.
Thank you, John. That deep love in his eyes, right? That's been a mark across these presentations, as people who have met him said there was something about him. When you were with him, he was with you. And the fact that he had just lost his mother, is really a sign that this was an extraordinary human being. Francesca, how about you? You did not meet Father.
Oh, you muted yourself. Wait,
Oops, sorry. Yeah. You are much younger, and you did not meet Father Giussani, but you met people who knew Father Giussani. So share with us your encounter and how it has marked your life.
Yeah, I feel kind of ridiculous talking after John, but my encounter with Father Giussani is very linked to John, so I think it's helpful to start that way. I guess I always say I'm a historian, so whenever I think about like how I remember things, I wonder, there's kind of a way that you remember things all together. And if I think about my encounter with Father Giussani, in my mind, there are like a few things that happen all at one time. And so I'll say it that way, which is just, I met Father Giussani at university because I'm from Toronto. John is my uncle, but I had known that they were part of this, whatever a movement was, which the word felt weird to me, and I didn't care. I mean, that was it. So when I moved to Montreal to go to university, I had the opportunity to start reading Father Giussani in School of Community with my cousins and some of the people there. So certainly in that sense, the text wasn't all that interesting to me. It was just a way to make friends. I mean, meet some new people. I would say that two things like at one time really shocked me. I took John's class on the religious sense, and I had started university after an experience of 12th grade, or as we say it in Canada the right way, grade 12, in which I had an English teacher whom I loved like very much, who was, I think, probably an atheist, and he had us reading beautiful texts in the senior year of high school. So we read The Great Gatsby, and we read Death of a Salesman, and we read T.S. Eliot. And I remember when we finished Death of a Salesman, he made us listen to it, and he just wept. This guy, like this teacher of mine, he sat there, and he was a real jerk. So it was a shock for all of us that he was crying, because he was really a mean man, and I really loved him a lot. And I remember after we read Gatsby, was the same. Like he was pushing us to like go deep into this text. And my friends, like, I guess we had a kind of we like to party a lot. So when we finished Gatsby, their only thing was like, let's have a Gatsby party. Like, let's all dress up like the 1920s, have a major party. We'll do what we always do. And I remember this feeling of like sadness. Like there was something more in that book that was more than just the party that we could have related to the theme of like Gatsby's indulgent, decadent lifestyle. And there was something more about Death of a Salesman than just the grade we could get on the paper that was making my teacher weep about it. And when I read Eliot, I remember just like reading the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock and just not being able to sleep that night, because that text like had shaken something in me. But you go to school and there's just, you feel like you don't get the explanation that you wanted totally to explain why Prufrock was shaking you so much. And there was no answer to that, And then I took John's class on the religious sense, and I started reading that book, and I felt like somebody was reading me. Like I felt like it was like that's me. Like that's all those things that I didn't know why I didn't want to have just a party for Gatsby, or why, Dr. Kowalczyk was crying about Death of a Salesman, but it's like it was there. It was describing me. But it wasn't just like the text of Father. So there was like for me, that moment of reading Father Giussani, I mean, I don't know how, I could read Father Giussani all day, every day. I mean, reading him is like reading the description of me. So I felt I found a friend, even if he was dead. It didn't occur to me, like, it didn't matter to me that he was dead. It wasn't a problem. It was like I found somebody who understands me. And then at the same time, John was there, right? Like my professor, Christoph, was there. Albacete was there at my first vacation, where like I was like, these people are nuts. Like I don't like what is going on at this vacation? Like I don't understand, you know. But Albacete was there. Like so there were people who were incarnating that same thing that I was reading in that book. And that was like, to me personally, it was the one of the few places that I had seen that could challenge, like that could be intellectually coherent, which was very important, is and was very important to me, and humanly shocking. I mean, just like that, those two things could be together. That you could keep reason and affection together. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to express the problem that way, but now I can say that those two things together is a mark of Father Giussani. It's a mark of the charism. It's a mark that when you see it, you don't want to leave because it's so rare to find in this world. So that's what I would say.
Beautiful, thank you. Let's just jump right. We're going to switch gears a little bit. I want to jump right into the video. So as I said earlier, this video exhibit is about 50 minutes, 60 minutes, and it's purely Giussani. So I'm going to share with you just the trailer.
Ma chi è Don Giussani?
Donna diocesi di Milano.
L'uomo non può immaginare un problema più grande per la sua libertà. Cristo, sì o no?
Sempre rimasto nella sua gravità di profeta, l'uomo dei miracoli. Donna, non piangere, disse, e restituire figlio. Ma disse prima, donna, non piangere. Un uomo che non viva un momento così con la sua donna, non ha mai amato la sua donna, mai. Un padre ed una madre sono tali non solo perché danno latte prima e risotto dopo al figlio che cresce, ma un padre e una madre danno loro stessi, un padre dà sé stesso al figlio. Il mio padre, quando ero accanto al mio letto, mi raccontava la parabola del ricco e pulone. Lui era un socialista accanito, perciò tutte le sere ricco e pulone.
Perché l'aspettavano così?
Perché credo in quello che dico.
Questo e basta?
Sì.
So I met Giussani myself when I was a young girl between college or high school, college and graduate school. And one of the most interesting things for me about him was precisely what he said there at the very end, you know, when the journalist asked him, why do people follow you? And he said, because what I speak is the truth. What I speak, I believe, right? And that was it was so convincing listening to him speak for me, and it was clear that what he spoke was from an experience, and whether it had been a one-on-one encounter with him or with a large group, I had that same experience every time. He had the charity, the gentleness to share with us his experience for our own joy and happiness. And so John, we'll start with you again. What for you what struck you about this video? Like, why should the 52 people on this call go watch that video?
I think the video has so many great moments. I can't even list them all. What I love about it, and I think this must be the 10th time I've seen it now. I've watched it 3 times this week. And it captures, I think, the essential Giussani. And if one wants to know what it was like even to be close up with him, the video communicates this. There's a few moments that really do strike me. Can I speak about them, Holly? That's just the ones, just a few. I'll just pick the ones that really struck me this time. Like you, this last one is by far number one. That last comment of his that we just saw there. Because I believe in what I say. I say that. I think more pointedly now than I would have even, a few years ago, because I realize now how difficult it is to find someone who actually truly does believe in what he or she says. I think of the academy. I have colleagues. I'm sure I do it myself. We spout on with ideas and ideology that if we were to apply to our own personal relationships, our lives would be infernal. And we're even willing to say that we believe what we say, but we really don't, And I can't remember what you said before. You said 2 words before about the way he lived, experienced charity, and I can't remember what the other word was. But his way of coming across to us, he didn't even have to explicitly tell us that he believed what he said. You just saw it in the way he related to us. I remember that his certainty was so great that it made me uncomfortable at first. I remember when I first met him, I said, it's not possible. I've been conditioned to believe you should never be certain about anything, right? Ultimately, you should never trust completely. Don't be certain about anything. There's always, you should doubt things. And he was saying the exact opposite. This what was supposed to sound chauvinistic, what was supposed to sound, certainly someone speaking from a very subjective position. He never told me to think this way in a relationship with him. He simply left you free. This is who I am. This is my experience. You judge. So he threw all the freedom on us, on myself, to judge. Is this certainty? Is it something real? Is it something I want or not? So I just love that line so much for that. The second one that I love is there's a line somewhere in the video where he speaks about the beginning of Christianity, how the first apostles went out. And they went to Spain, then to India, and he says, and they went beyond. And then at one point he says, and finally they arrived at my mother. He goes, my mother, and my mother then told me, right? I remember that one of the things that he kept repeating back in the 90s was that that the sign and the mystery coincide, and that and for him the mystery and the human faces were so. They coincided essentially, that people went out and preached and not simply preached out there, but they brought them through themselves. They brought Christ to others, and I was struck by that, because I remember when I told Father Giussani about the beginning of the community of 2 people in Vancouver back in the early 90s. And he was so enthusiastic about this. And what was his first reaction? He said, okay, he says, now let me reconstruct this. Okay, Christ communicated himself to me, he said, I met Anna met you, and who did you meet? I said, okay, I met Christine met Steve, who started the community in Vancouver. For him, everything was so carnal. And again, this mystery, the sign of these people and the mystery coinciding, right? Spain, the apostle going to Spain and India continued for him all the way to those last 2 people in Vancouver. And the third thing that really strikes me in this, that really moved me deeply in this video was Father Giussani speaking about John chapter 21. Peter, do you love me? That whole scene, and it hit me like it never hit me before watching it this week here. Because I remember when he first spoke about it, but it's hit me so differently this time. How is it possible, that by now billions of people have heard or read, the story over the last couple of thousand years, and yet he's bringing something so poignant and so new in his telling of this story, right? And it's really because I think of this relationship, between Jesus and Peter was lived by Father Giussani also in the same way. He participated in that relationship. He was within that relationship. So that when he spoke to us, when he spoke to me, when he spoke to anyone in front of him, he had that very same gaze towards us that Jesus had regarding Peter. I remember when I'd see Father Giussani, one of the things that would always happen to me, my inadequacies, like Peter, my inadequacies would come to the surface. And I love the fact that he says that about Peter, that his shortcomings would come to the surface, weakness would come to the surface. But what was more important than that was that love for Christ that would come to the surface, right? It was so easy, so simple when you were with Giussani. He as if he participated in Jesus' gaze upon you that made you understand your inadequacies, but rather than feel ashamed of them or embarrassed about them, you had kind of a sense of irony about them. Look at this, despite all this, look at this, who am I? I am this person that loves him in this way, that I cannot help but love him in this way. And I think that everyone shared in that. And I just, when you watch this scene in the video, I think you have an inkling of what it must have been, to be with Giussani.
Beautiful. Thank you, John. Francesca?
I was gonna touch on some of those. I've watched this video also like a number of times, and again with John, so I won't repeat it. Just saying, like, I believe in what I say. I think a person who believes in what he says is very rare, and who lives exactly as he believes is very rare. But what strikes me the more I go on, I mean, so even just thinking about it this way, this is a man who was destined for a great path as a theologian, right? Like as an academic, as a thinker, he had it all set up for him. And we tell this story like a mythology, and then he met these kids on a train and then he decided this and whatever. But if you put yourself in the situation and you think, like, if I think of myself as an academic and you're headed in a certain trajectory, to be very well admired and like, well thought of among your peers and colleagues and the people with power, and you, from like one little moment, like 1 second on a train, change the whole trajectory of your life, which of us would do that? Like, which of us would change our career entirely based on the sign of some kids that you're never going to see again, that sit with you on a bus and say, like, I think you're an idiot, basically? I mean, the idea that before Father Giussani was Father Giussani, he was a guy like you and me who was so radically in love with Jesus that like every decision he was making was about, how do I communicate this? I mean, I find that fascinating, because I understand as I go on that this Christ yes or no is like really the question. Like, I'm going to give my life to something, and either it's going to be power and it's going to be career and it's going to be recognition, or it's going to be Jesus. And there's really like nothing in between those two things. And to see him not as the famous guy that we all think is a saint already and whatever, but as a guy like you and me at 30 years old who says, yeah, you know what? I need to go this way. Like all the accolades, all everything else, I need to go this way. Why? Because I was given something and I need these kids to see it too. I mean, to me, that grabs me totally. And that's kind of the whole movie for me more and more, is the radicality of Father Giussani, the radicality of giving yourself, of living for an ideal, of saying, like he says, like hope against hope, of telling parents, like, educate your kids these ways. Like, we need to tell people about Jesus. I understand that. I mean, I can't be, I'm a Soviet historian. I'm like Russian in my soul. If I weren't going to give my life for Jesus, I was going to give it for something else, and it was going to be extreme, right? But like, I probably would have ended up in a very, very different place if I hadn't seen somebody who could give everything at this extreme level. And that shocked me through the video again. And the second thing was the friendship. Like when at the end he says, like, may all of this not finish among us. The more time goes on, and I see how alone everyone in this world is, and how afraid everyone in this world is, and how we keep all of those things for ourselves. I mean, even in the Christian community, like the idea that your life could be totally taken up and shared so that you might say, may all of this never end among us. I'm thinking about the general pessimism or the general sense of like, if I look at my students, if I look at myself, the general sort of like that life is not something to be excited about. Life is something to be endured and hope that it doesn't hit you too hard. And you see somebody saying like, may all of this never finish among us. Like, may all of this, like, if you saw Jonathan Fields yesterday talking about Albacete, saying like, let's take this show on the road, like when do we take, like, you understand that Father Giussani opened up a huge horizon of life for every kind of person, because like you were no longer alone. You were a simple example. I'm looking into maybe buying a house. Yesterday, I was talking with 3 of my friends from the movement that I trust the most, and we were all deciding what I was going to do with this house. And one of the friends was saying, if we get this house, you can put a big table so we can invite more people for mission, so we can have more people so that there can be a bigger school community. And then this place can be, if somebody needs to go there, I think we should go to this town because we can meet more people in this place because it's easier to do a school community in this place. So my little thing, like a house, your finances, your money, your whatever, becomes for the mission, for the world. And I'm not alone anymore in like making the decisions about money, about my house, about where I go, about what I do. And I could say at the end of that phone call, may all of this never end among us, right? May all of this never end among us, because when you're not alone, you want to take on the whole world. And in that video, when he says things like, when Fontolan is saying like, was it the church or was it mankind who abandoned the church? And you have this Giussani who's like on the verge of death, and he says like, according to me, no, according to us, like that he couldn't think about himself without saying we. I mean, that is an experience that when you live it, you can say, may all of this never finish among us. And I will be grateful to him until the death for that, because I would be alone. I mean, personally, as a person, I would be totally alone without him.
Thank you, Francesca. Beautiful. So we have about 12 minutes left to our time together, and we'd like to open it to questions. If you'd like to ask a question of either one of the discussants, you can either raise your real hand, your virtual hand, or you can put something in the chat to one of our tech helpers who can help call on you. So feel free. Okay, Miriam.
Hi everyone. Hi John, hi Francesca. So I have a question about John and also Francesca. It's about something Francesca just said, and John mentioned at the beginning. When you first, John, met the movement, you were kind of skeptical about the community because you were Catholic, but you didn't think you needed a community. And so how that changed for you, like as, how that changed?
It changed in the following way, that actually, no, I'll change it very simply. It changed in the sense that I had of myself. I could not imagine myself now, or I can't say I now without a perception of who I belong to. That was something that was completely alien to me 30 years ago. There's a beautiful story that I obviously love telling and repeating by J.D. Salinger about this. It's a long story I'm not going to go into, but one line from it that I just love. It's about a nun who takes a distance art course. She lives in Toronto, and the course is being taught by somebody in Montreal. And but the fellow wants to know who his students are and asks them to send artwork samples and a photo of themselves. And all his students, all the art teacher's students, all send photos of themselves in crazy poses. And this nun sends a photo of her convent. I think that's the step that I took from when I first, from before meeting the movement to meeting the movement. I can't perceive of myself without this sense of belonging to this community, to these others. But I think that's the most fundamental change in me. Everything else I could go on describe, but that's a fundamental change, I think.
Francesca, would you like to respond as well?
I mean, I would say that it was always a fight for me personally. I mean, I prefer to be by myself in many ways. I mean, but you don't do well by yourself. It's a simple. I mean, when you think you do, until you see people that are, I mean, freer, people that are with a huge sense of perspective about life. And then you go off by yourself again, and then you're always doing the back and forth. But I think, I mean, there's a piece in the school community right now that's saying in the beginning of the chapter, that you don't do well in solitude. You're not meant for it. And to have the real experience of, I mean, we just saw the mental health exhibit. Psychologically, a man is not meant to be by himself. But the Christian companionship, to experience in the flesh that that your flesh and the flesh of your friends is transformed by the presence of Christ, you need to touch that, or it's theoretical. You need to touch that buying your house can be for building the church. Otherwise, the dualism ultimately will win in you. So, I mean, I was conquered by it, by seeing friends that were living in a totally different way. And then realizing that when I was without that, I was not well. And then always back and forth. But ultimately, I'm not well alone. I see that, if that's clear.
Thank you. Thank you. No, very clear, very clear. In fact, if you didn't see the psychologist, definitely worth the watch. It was phenomenal. Actually, the four discussants who were speaking. So anyone else, a question? Hanouk.
Thank you so much, Holly. This session reminds me of the first time I discovered paintings by, gosh, I'm blanking on the name, early Renaissance painter. I mean, as to how that I felt like such a beauty could never exist. So it leaves me with very little to say, but the ultimate question is, where do I go from here? And I wondered whether you had any suggestion for that.
John, Francesca.
I actually don't, what do you mean, where do I go from here? Like, I don't understand, maybe, but the question meaning, what's the next step?
So I have this anxiety and a tension that I have this limited amount of time, and I've been given this incredible grace. What do I do with this? How do I make sure that I don't become a pond of this grace, but that it flows through me like a river? How do I make sure that happens? Based on what I learned from you guys about Giussani.
But Francesca said before, that line that she picked up from that one of the last line there of Father Giussani in the video, that may all this never end. In fact, it's never ended, right? It has not ended for us. That gaze that Father Giussani had on me has continued with Father Caron and with the community now. That gaze is constantly on me. We're constantly reminded, even recently in what we're reading for School of Community, we're reminded that the way in which we don't interpret or distort the charism given to us is comparing what we live constantly with with the charism, which he said is always a historical point. So where do we go from here? It's where we go from here at any time in our lives. Once we've met this grace, as you say, right? Once we've met this grace, what is left for us if not to compare constantly what we live, not with ideas that we received from people in the movement, but with with that point where we see Christ present for us in the community. There are not just any face, as Father Caron keeps reminding us, but a face constantly. There is a face constantly for us, a historical point with which we compare what we live. It's the work that we have to pick up on every single day, every single hour.
Francesca, did you want to add anything to that?
I mean, John has covered everything. But I would say, like, think about what Father Giussani said about going up those 3 stairs. Like, what am I doing here? I'm here to share with those kids, like, what I had the privilege of receiving. So what are you doing when you get up and you go to work every day? What are you doing when you meet the people at your job? Like, this is the question that he's asking you too. It's we're only here because Father Giussani asked himself that question. How that continues is the grace of God. I mean, how that will happen, it might be one person. As yesterday we learned about Albacete presenting Father Giussani in Kansas with 4 people in the room. I mean, how many people is not your concern. But to get up every day and say, like, what is my life for? This is what we receive from Father Giussani. I mean, this, like, so that it may never end, get on your knees and beg. I mean, among you. But that it should be a concern of yours that it never end. Absolutely. That our time, our money, our energy, everything should go to this is a decision that Father Giussani made and is there pushing us to ask ourselves the same question.
Thank you. We have time for one more question or comment. Mary Ellen.
This question is for both John and Francesca. Can you say in a nutshell, I know it's probably difficult to say in a nutshell and quickly, what is the way in which your knowledge of Christ has most radically changed in meeting Father Giussani? The way in which you knew Christ or perceived him before you met the movement and now?
Thank you. Excellent question. Whoever's ready, jump in first.
I'll just jump in. It's very quick for me. Before I realized this afterwards, like I could not have said this before meeting Father Giussani, but I realized that after meeting Father Giussani, Christ had been an idea for me. He became a real person for me meeting Father Giussani. And I was most of all touched in this, or helped in this, by seeing the way Father Giussani did not talk about the Gospels, but entered the Gospels. He was in the Gospels when he spoke about them. And it made me consider even the Gospels so very differently, so very, very differently as yet one more way to encounter Christ. The second thing about this is that Christ then became something, this mysterious presence that I could encounter carnally in those, how can I put those unusual, those events that entered my life. That again, that possibility of that he actually wasn't simply an idea or someone in the past, but was here, present, and encounterable in these exceptional, people, events, moments that I lived.
Yeah, I mean, Christ was real. Father Giussani made Christ real. He made him alive. That was totally not within my realm of absolutely not within my realm of consciousness. He made him alive through his writing, and then he made him alive through his people, so that you meet people and you say, this is impossible. What is going on here? Before you even say it's Jesus, you just say, like, I don't understand how, my friend Cristina is here. If I'm here in the movement, it's because she was living in a way that you say, I mean, this doesn't make any sense. And the more you say this doesn't make any sense, and somebody tells you that's Jesus, and they, you say, okay, I mean, like, but he's real. Christ he was not real for me. Father Giussani made him real through him and his people.
Beautiful. Thank you. Wow, what a way to end. Really a beautiful example of how Father Giussani lives through his children, both of you speaking. It's evident that may this never end, right? We never want this to end. And the New York Encounter has not ended. It goes on all today. Just wanted to share with you in the bottom in the chat, you'll see the video, the link for the video. You'll also see it on newyorkencounter.org. Please watch it. Love to hear what you thought of it. And thank you so much, John. Thank you, Francesca, both Canadians. Viva Canada. And to our chat coordinators, Sean and Veronica, you guys rock. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming.